The meeting of the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee will now come to order. First, I would like to get approval of the minutes from our last meeting. I believe that was October 27th. Everybody received the minutes, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Had an opportunity to review those minutes?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. With that being the case, I'd like to request a motion to approve the minutes. A motion?
Motion to approve.
A second to that motion?
Second.
Right. All in favor? We'll raise our hands. I assume all in favor of approval. Minutes have been approved. Oh, great. So we'll move on. The first item of business was the Chelmsford Telemedia Program on Civil Rights. I know that folks had received an email from me with the information on that. And I'm curious, did everyone have an opportunity to at least look at a couple of the sessions or the installments, if you will, of the documentary? Yeah, great.
I watched one. Yep.
Great. Okay. Yeah. I had an opportunity to go through them. I had actually had a conversation with Jesse Hines, who's one of the creators and the narrator, obviously. And initially, he had reached out to us to see if we might be interested in participating in a program that they may develop on promoting that series. They have a plan to work with Chelmsford Telemedia to create an individual program where people would be talking about the series. I did invite him to our meeting, and he shared at the time that they're in the embryonic stages of determining what that program might look like. And so they're really not in a position at this point in time to discuss how our involvement, what exactly it might look like, and how we may work with them. I had indicated to him that once they got clarity on what they wanted to do, then by all means, we love for him and his team to come in, talk with us about what they envision, and I assured him that we'd be interested in assisting them, in being involved. It might include possibly some TV time for some of us, being on a panel and actually being in the studio. So once we get more detail, more detail from Jesse, then he'll be coming to us, and then we'll be able to have some more specific information around that. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that info with everyone in the group. So great. So again, when I have more info, I'll follow up. And I'm seeing, I don't see, and maybe it's my screen, if Joe is, Joe's here? Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is obviously, looking at the goals, continuing our goals discussion. And I wanted to put a big thank you out. Oh, I'm sorry.
One thing, I do see that Jesse is in the meeting.
Yeah, I believe he's here just to observe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just, he is in the meeting. That's right. And he was here. He just wanted to observe, and see what we're doing. But again, as it relates to the specifics of that program, he'll be returning when they have some details for us to discuss at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. But what I wanted to do before we got much further is to give a big thank you to Joe for putting together the survey. Quite frankly, without that, we would be kind of dead in the water, so to speak, because we really needed a way to try to get all that information together in a format where we could look at it and make some meaning about that. So kudos to Joe, and a big thank you to Joe for all that. And what we'd obviously like to do at this point is to get a sense of what the survey reviews actually look like. So I was going to hand it over to Joe at this point and get the information from him. Joe?
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just going to apologize in advance. I'm actually up in the mountains with poor reception, so I'm going to try and help out how I can. So thanks for everybody who answered their responses to the survey. It was great because we were able to kind of get a sense as to what's important to each person. What I did is I put the questions in there, and what I actually did was it was a weighted response. So if you marked it 5 stars, that obviously carried more weight than if you marked it 1 star or 2 stars. So based on that weighted average, it gives us a score for each question. And I was just going to use that to kind of help create like a priority list or a hierarchy, if you will, of what's important to everybody. So just going through each survey we'll start with education, I guess. Of all the questions that came up, the most important one was question 1, updating the curriculum to include anti-racist messaging. That had an average score of 3.9, the weighted average score, 4.9 for overall. The second highest priority within the education was actually question 2, like the diverse representation within schools. And then the third highest was collaborate with existing or new school related committees. So I know some of the people in this group have existing relationships, and it sounded like that was pretty high on the priorities list in the earlier discussion. So what I can do is I can send out all of the ranked scoring after this meeting. I just don't have it available to send out right now. Any questions so far? No?
No.
Okay.
No?
Okay. So that was education. Excuse me. Again, I can send out all of the responses so that we have like a list, but I can go over the top ones for the community initiatives now. So give me 1 second. Okay. So again, same ranking system. It weighted more for the higher star averages. It looks like there were a couple tied for first here. Or the first one, the highest ranked one was question 6, urge the town of Chelmsford to declare racism a public health issue. Overall, that had 4.5 average star rating. So it obviously is pretty important to the group. Second place, there were 2 tied with 4.4. And that was around town-sponsored diversity celebrations for things like Black History Month, Juneteenth, other celebrations. And that was also tied in to question 7, which also had the same score, using the data from surveys to create an equity plan and implement goals. I thought that one kind of covered a lot of the other questions, but I think it was really important to note that was up there too. Any questions about the community initiatives part?
No.
Okay. And then finally, for the third section, this would be the communication priorities. And I probably should have started with this. I'm just trying to figure out how we want to communicate with everyone. It looks like, as far as like what method do we want to communicate to the public, Facebook was number 1 by far. Number 2 was email, tied with like local news. And then much further below that, we had like the other social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter. And I see that there were some custom responses too. So town website came up a few times. The Lowell Sun, our actual website page within the town of Chelmsford. So those are all great ideas. And then a few other ideas within that section that gained high ratings. Question 7, initiatives to attract and promote minority-owned businesses in Chelmsford. That had a pretty high rating as well. And then coming in third place was just collaborating with other influencers to share goals and gather input. So I think that kind of tied into some of the other objectives too. So again, I can put these into a nice digestible format and send it out to the group either tonight or tomorrow morning, if that works.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Well, that's great. I think that'll work fine. And then, as we have a chance to look at it, and make sure that we can fully digest it. But I think it's gone a long way to kind of take that list that had 30 some odd things on it to make it into something that's a little bit more manageable. So yeah, that's great. That's great. Any other comments or questions from the group?
No,
Because
I thought this was a great compilation. I think you did a
Yeah.
great job, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it
Yeah,
was
my
wonderful.
pleasure.
Easy, yeah.
I was trying to find the clap your hands emoji on the toolbar down here, but I couldn't find it.
I'll take the verbal version. That works for me.
You did an excellent job. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hope that we all find this information helpful, and I'm sure that we're going to probably go back to it over the next 6 months or whatever, and use it as a picking up point for other things as we get more progress.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. So I believe that probably the next step in the process would be to start to prioritize how we're going to go about this list, to look at things, and I'm not sure if the folks agree that that's the next step, because that's what I'm seeing as the next thing we need to do. Does that make sense, or is there another step that you think we need to take before going there? Do we need to spend more time with it? So again, I want us all to kind of feel comfortable with the process, because we're going to need to, start to embrace this stuff pretty quickly, and then figure out where we're headed. So, anyone want to share their thoughts on that?
If I may
Brian?
make a suggestion, why don't we just start with the number one priority in each of the 3 sections and discuss how we want to implement each of those. And then once we feel like we've gotten enough done on each of those initiatives, then we can move down to the number 2s in each category, just to make sure we're keeping a breadth of activity across the areas we're sure we wanted to hit.
I second that, Brian. I think that was a good
Yep.
call, Brian.
I think it's great. I have one question, because I think this all tied back to goals, and I think that after going through the survey, a lot of those things are, how we want to structure ourselves, how we want to communicate. Um, where do we tie into the goals for year one? Or so I guess my question is our goal for year one to just establish ourselves as an organization and have um, these actions that we want to take to further establish ourselves, or are there higher level goals that we want to also consider for year one?
Well, would the mission statement be our higher level goals? Like, it's no overarching goal, it's the mission statement. So do you want to see how these fit into the mission statement?
Um, well, things like communications, where we're going, like one of the examples was where we're going to communicate out from. That's more of
Yeah.
an action to me than a goal. So I'm
Oh, I
just
see.
wondering
Yeah.
how we separate out the
Oh.
actions from the actual goals.
So like the goal is to reach, say, so many people within a certain period. That would be the
Yeah,
goal.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I got you.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Any other thoughts? 'Cause it feels kind of like it feels more like a part of the norming a norm process for me. I mean, we're going to need to communicate with people anyway. That's
Absolutely.
not necessarily. I guess for me, it doesn't feel so much like a goal other than a norm. How are we going to communicate? What are we gonna be doing? So that's a little bit. I wouldn't see that as a goal in terms of, there's a specific endpoint. There's one thing that we're trying to do, because we may determine in communication, for example, we may determine that we want to use a number of different communication vehicles, given whatever the message is we want to communicate. There might be one time where we want to reach out to as many people as possible in the town. So we may use all different kinds of things. Facebook is great. I know a lot of people are on it, but not everybody's on Facebook. Not everybody uses Facebook.
That's right.
And, or even knows what it is necessarily. So, I think that feels more like a norm piece. but I also think, Carly, that that's a conversation we need to have as well to kind of figure that out. Again, I'm not sure it's part of the goals piece, but I think we need to have a norm conversation that says things like, how do we report out to the select board, for example? Do we need to go see them on a quarterly basis? Do we do it twice a year? You know, Tricia, I kind of reach out to you to give us guidance in that space. You know, is there some other group that we need to be regularly communicating with, and how do we do that? I know that, again, I think that's like a norming conversation that I think might be a little bit separate from this one.
Right, and there were definitely goals in there, like changing the curriculum to include things that focus on racial diversity and inclusion. That's
Right.
a goal.
Right. Absolutely.
Getting the town to commit to calling uh, what do you call it, a prejudice or whatever, a public health
Public
concern.
health has, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those to me feel like goals, and then there were things in that survey that felt more like tasks. So
Right.
that's all I'm trying to say.
No, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. I think we can, try to pull some of the things that appear to be more task oriented or norming oriented out of this list, and put them also on our larger list of things to do, and to do pretty quickly. Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense.
Bill, Joe has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Thanks. So something that I was thinking of, and this didn't come out of the survey, but I have to guess that different people in here have different priorities and maybe interests. I think I've mentioned before that I really am excited and motivated to get involved with like the business aspect of stuff. Some of you might be interested in the education. Would it be, maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but would it make sense to maybe kind of figure out who is most passionate about which section so that we can kind of lighten the load, split it up, and then once I send out all of the results of the survey, perhaps we can almost form like subgroups within here to kind of talk about how we can tackle a number of different initiatives at once instead of all 12 of us doing one at a time. Is that something that might be of interest?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, education is my thing. Business, I know next to nothing about. So I don't think I'd have much to contribute about how to help in the business end, but the education end, I could help take a leadership role in that end of it. So I think that makes a lot of sense, Joe.
Yeah, my thought process was if we could, and Phil, I don't want to step on your toes here, but if we could take this data from the survey, I'm going to send out the list of the priorities, but if we can look at that and say, okay, well, there's a few people who think that this is really high on their priority list. Maybe we don't have to like sacrifice each one. We can all help out. So that was just my idea.
Well, and help me, Joe. Are you suggesting that we potentially focus our attention on items that weren't necessarily that high on the list, or am I misunderstanding you?
Well, that's a possibility. What I was thinking more like was, okay, here's a number of priority items that we'd like to tackle this year. And then maybe we can say, okay, who's interested in helping with this?
Excuse me. There seems to be a lot of interference somewhere. Is anybody else hearing that?
I was hearing.
It might be my device. Is this better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, it's a lot better. Thanks.
So I was thinking maybe in a couple of meetings after we have this list, then maybe what we could do is say, okay, who's interested in tackling this? And then maybe we can break off into little subcommittees that can help come up with a plan. So then the following meeting say, okay, what is the education group? Like what's the progress here? Like what's the goal? Like where are we at? That way we can just kind of stay on track and then we don't get sidetracked with too many cooks in the kitchen scenario.
Right now, and how do we address, or do we even need to address the situation of making sure everybody has a chance to, share what their feelings are about any of our primary goals? Since we've identified, 9 or 10 things that are the top ones. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to communicate what their feelings are about each one of those if they so choose. So I guess, if we were to split off into individual, not individual, but into separate subcommittees or teams working on those, I wouldn't want people to feel like, well, gee, I'm not on the education team and I have some good ideas, but I'm not on that team. So maybe I don't have a chance to communicate. Do people understand what I'm getting at or what I'm concerned about?
Yeah, Phil, I don't see that as a real concern with this group, because if they are going to be working on certain specific aspects that they're passionate about, they're going to be bringing it back to us collectively, and we'll have an opportunity to have input at that point. Or they could also, I would imagine that if Susan was in charge of the education piece and they were going to have a separate subcommittee meeting, that any one of us could attend that if we had an idea that we wanted to bring to the table. So I think that will naturally evolve.
That'll be okay. All right.
This committee is already kind of gelling. I think that would be, I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody, that they would be welcome and wouldn't be stepping on anybody's toes. Sharice has had her hand up for a little bit too.
So I just had a comment and a question. Thank you, Tricia. One is, I would like to go back to what Carly was saying. I do believe that, we have our mission statement, and in this conversation, does that include that we're getting to the point where we're making goals? Because I think a mission statement needs to have alongside it the goals. And if this is part of what we're doing, that's, great. But I think that's important to establish. And then the second question I have is, I don't know how Teams platform works. I know when you're doing, when you're on the other one, Zoom, you can go off into meeting rooms. You can section off and have your, whether it's the education, communication, and then you can convene in those meeting rooms and then come back and have an open discussion for at least time's sake. If we could, maybe take a meeting like that and host it as like that. You go into once we establish our groups, you go into the meetings, but I don't know if Teams is set up like that. If you can break off into groups and come back into the main fold, that way it answers the question about, the concern you have, Phil, about everybody participating.
I think I could set up subcommittee meetings for anybody in Teams that wanted to do that. It would be, I'd still have to kind of post it, because the way this Teams works and we're a group in the town of Chelmsford. And so, anybody outside my organization, it's kind of a pain because I kind of have to facilitate all of them. I don't necessarily have to be there, but I have to push it out to everybody. I'm sure there's other ways we could do it, but in order for it to remain a public meeting and be able to publicly post it and all of that stuff, it seems like it's easier to keep it all in one place. But I certainly would be okay with you just sending me, if it was okay with Phil, subcommittee agendas. And again, we just post them out. Susan has her hand up.
So just along with that. So I see sometimes the select board will be having a working group, or the school committee will be having a working group, but those are still public meetings, open meetings? They are. Okay.
Yeah, they're still posting those, within the 48 hours, just like any other public meeting. So they're all posted on the website, and, public accessibility. Would have to set up the Teams part so that the public could participate if they wanted to, until we get to meet in person again.
So the problem with going off into rooms like you can in Zoom is those rooms would end up being private, and that's not allowed.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
So at this point, since we do have, or at least it appears that we have at least the three main buckets, if you will, of the areas of our goals fit in. Do people know which of those three buckets they want to be involved in? Do we want to, kind of raise our hands at this point, or do we need more time? Where are people around that?
Are you talking about these three buckets being communication, town group influencers, and town culture and norms? Is that what you're talking about? Or Is it, well, there's other buckets too, schools. I mean,
Well,
what are the 3 buckets you're
Oh, the
looking at?
buckets, the buckets as Joe had presented them: education, community incentive, and communications, for example. We're the ones that appear to be where we're having the most, the highest level of interest.
Business, education, and community, is that, I mean, because
like
business was one that was a big one, and
I like
education was another one.
Right. And yeah,
Joe, was there,
community
I'm sorry.
initiative. Community
Rachel has her-
initiative. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just had a suggestion. I wonder if instead of using those 3 groupings to pick like where we focus, I wonder if it makes sense to take the goals, roll them up, and look at the top 3 or 4, and then break off into subcommittees based on those top goals, because we might find that like 2 from community cycle up towards the top, 1 from education and 1 from community. So just kind of separate and make it more goal oriented than fall into those groupings.
Joe, isn't that what you had suggested?
I like that idea.
Is that what? Okay.
Yeah, I like that idea. And again, I'm just kind of I was spitballing here. So, but I think that Rachel's idea is great.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
So Joe, then do you want to go off and actually pull that list together? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I can just, let me just put all this stuff into an email so that everybody can look at it. Cause the way that it breaks it down, it's like charts and stuff, and I have to like kind of consolidate it. So I think once we have that in front of us, it'll be a lot easier to look at and say, okay, here are actually where what the top goals are. And then I think what Rachel was saying is taking that and maybe kind of bucketing those together might be a bit more logical.
Okay, see heads nodding, so I guess that seems to make sense to most folks.
And I do, the way they were set up on the survey with communication being a goal, but that's more of a way to deal with all the other goals to me. Like business wasn't in a separate space on the survey, but reaching out to business is part of what you're going to do, like you're going to communicate out to businesses or something. So it seems like there's other pieces that are really deeper in there when Joe sends that to us than what we just see on the 3 headings. The headings aren't really how we're going to break up, because communication's part of all of it. We need the goals to know what it is we're going to talk to the schools about, and the goals so we know what we're going to talk to community leaders about, and the goals so we know what we're going to talk to business people about. I think that's why we really need the goals as separate from the tasks to become more clear. I see.
I see some heads nodding.
You
Natasha, you have
articulated it so well. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say, and I think I was trying to say the same thing.
Latasha,
Okay.
any thoughts?
So I definitely think it would be helpful once we have the list for us to decide. Can everyone hear me? You having trouble hearing me? Sorry. Basically, I'm on board, whatever we decide to do.
Joe, were you about to say something?
No, I think what the plan sounds good to me.
All right. I see heads nodding. So we will get that information from you and go through the listing, and then I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the process right. As we're going through that information, we would be looking to see which of those goals or goal areas we would be most interested in working with, so that we could talk about those the next time and potentially break up into whatever, if they're going to be groups or teams, we'd be doing that. Is that, am I following that appropriately?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think we
and I'll
should
just add.
really, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, my last point is that I kind of made up the weighting scale. So if there's a goal that people feel real passionate about, even though it's maybe lower on the priority list, speak up. Like, that doesn't mean just because it's a low rated one that it's not important. So I just encourage people to advocate for yourself and your objectives if that is lower on the list.
Sounds good.
Can everyone hear me better now?
Not much better.
Tricia, were you going to make a comment?
Yeah, I just felt like we needed to really pin down those goals a lot tighter before we start breaking up into groups. So, you know,
Right.
as we go through the list and we see what Joe sends us, we can really just tighten them up and then categorize them the way Rachel and Joe said, and then we can start looking at breaking them out. But I think right now they're still a little too loose to break
Okay.
into groups on.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like we have our key agenda item for our next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly is covering that. Great. That's good. Any other conversation on this, or we're all set on our, we've agreed on the direction we're going to go at this point for goals? Everybody's in agreement? Great. That's good.
I agree.
All right, great. The next item on the agenda would be new business. Oh,
Can I just make a quick comment about new business, Phil?
yes.
That is typically not allowed to be an agenda item on itself unless you attach something to it. This
Okay.
time I just let it go so we can talk about it. But next
Okay,
time you wanted
that's
to bring up
great, yeah.
business, like you had mentioned, you were going to talk about something specific under it, just add that specific thing to the agenda under new business. Okay. So, I mean, we can't really introduce new business without
Okay.
it being
I
posted.
see. Yeah, because I thought that it might be okay to add that, but no, I'm glad to get the clarification. So in the future, new business needs to have, you know, a title or a focus item attached to it.
Yeah, something specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question though. Maybe is a better way to word it. How do we allow a time in the meeting for a member of the committee to just bring up something that they'd like to get put on the agenda? What do you call that part of the meeting?
What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get in touch with your chairman and ask them to add that to the agenda before the agenda is posted.
Got it. All
I
right.
know. So
We're newbies.
I know, that's okay. It's the way you're supposed
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, we're all learning. That's for sure.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I guess at this point, then, can I bring up the email that I received, Tricia, that we talked about? Is that here the right place for, or should we just move past that?
Past that at this
Okay.
point, because it wasn't on the agenda and it was something that you and I can talk about separately,
Awesome.
because I think I can probably help you answer
Okay.
that person. But I would
Okay.
mention to Phil before the meeting started that if you wanted to add correspondence as a regular agenda item, then that would free up a lot of things that we could, you know, put in there. But typically you'd have to then, you know, have that document for everybody to have and
Right.
review.
And like new business, would we need to identify the correspondence beforehand?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. All right. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank God you're here, Trish, because I think we would be running amok.
Yep.
I'm glad to be helpful.
All right. No, I was just taking a couple quick notes on that. Okay, great. Are there any other items, any other things that the group, anyone in the group needs to share at this point? Susan, your hand up?
So we had talked about, someone had brought up thinking we needed some kind of logo. Are we ready to kind of try to get someone to do that just based on our mission statement? Because I have talked to the art teacher just in general terms, the art teacher at the high school, about asking if she had any students who might want to do that. And she thinks she might have some who might, but she hasn't presented it to them because I told her I'm not ready to give her the, parameters yet. Is it too soon?
What art teacher did you talk to, Susan?
Maddie Alves.
Oh, she's a good friend of mine.
Yeah. I'm pretty friendly with her too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I eat with them. That's who I eat with, Diane.
Oh, you see her way more often than I do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to try to have something ready to just start showing once we start to communicate. But anyway, it's just a thought because she's ready to present it to students when we're ready to have some students start working on it.
I personally think it's a great idea to get them started because then, as you said, when we do correspondence and we start to reach out to the community, if we have it on letterhead or note or logo, you know what I mean, to identify with it. And do we have enough information that we could send them the mission statement along with our title? And that should be enough maybe for them to get started. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I thought when I was bringing that up the logo, I think someone added and mentioned that it would be nice to have it as some kind of contest so we could get the kids engaged, if I recall that conversation correctly.
Yep.
One thing I might mention it because I'm a board member for the Chelmsford Dog Park, and they recently the CDA wanted to have a contest through the high school with the art students to create a dog park flag, and it took probably about 5 or 6 months before we were able to get something from the high school kids. So I'm not sure if they were busy or what happened. Maybe it wasn't communicated well. But you're shaking your head, Lauren.
Because I did it too, and it took them about 2 weeks, and my ex parents got it within 2 weeks. So
really,
I think,
so they held up on it.
Well, I hang around with the art teachers, and I'm in the fine arts department.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was just a lack of communication on the part of the people who were leading that from the Chelmsford Dog Park, or if the students were just too busy or what. But I just wanted to.
It probably didn't get to the right hands. That's my guess.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you guys want to proceed, Susan knows Maddie. I know 3 of the art teachers, and I know my theater students are always coming up with logos. That's what we do.
That's great.
So I think so. Maybe tell your poor dog park people though.
Oh no, we got it, and it was awesome. It's just I
Okay.
just remember every time we got an update, they'd say no one's really expressed an interest in doing it. The folks who were taking the lead on it. So maybe they were just not talking to the right people.
Well, now the kids with COVID, they probably do have time to come up with logos. So maybe.
Yeah, and there are also a number of Chelmsford High School grads that followed their career into art. So other people that you might want to consider too.
Right. So I personally vote yes, go with the logo, start the thing. That's me. If anyone else wants to take a vote on getting the logo started.
Where's everybody else?
Tricia, Phil, I'm sorry. Latasha put something in the chat, what she was trying to communicate. I didn't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't.
And what did you mean by that, Latasha? Like you can make the goals SMART, SMART. What does that mean?
Very specific, achievable, measurable. What is hard and it takes time.
You may have to chat it, Latasha. We can't hear you.
Yeah, it's an acronym it's an acronym that means measurable. I forget what the S stands for, but measurable,
specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, irrelevant, and time bound. Yeah. So and I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, basically, when you're thinking about a goal, you're thinking about an end result. So the question is, you need to be able to measure what's that end result, what's it look like, how can I determine whether I'm getting there or not, when do I think I might get there, and what do I need to do to get there. So it's really a way to make sure that you're asking all the right questions and to keep you from coming up with a goal that might be too broad or too poorly defined or something that like world peace that you may never get to. So you need to kind of focus in on it. So it's a good way to help you once you start talking about the individual goals, like in influencing, hiring decisions at the public school level to make sure we've got increased numbers of diverse candidates. What are we going to do? How do you do that? Well, you can focus in on where the jobs are posted, this, that, and the other thing, but you get down to that level of detail. So I think that's what we want to do, without kind of belaboring that point. When we finally start to talk about each individual goal, we need to be able to talk to each of those points with that goal to say, how are we going to get there? What are we, and what does the group do? What are we doing to actively make sure that we reach whatever that end result is? So, making sure that they're smart goals, that makes perfect sense. Jennifer, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so I have a question. As far as back to the logo, I'm wondering logistically, how would it work if we brought in that, and not just the high school kids, but to the community? I mean, I don't know logistically how that would work, but that would bring in a bigger pool of people, but I'm not sure. What are your thoughts?
It's a good idea. I mean, I think it's a good idea, including, you could include the school system, of course, but then you could include on publicizing it through the newspapers and test our communication skills right away, in a way,
I mean, I remember when we were taking our kids to the library often for story times and stuff, there would always be some sort of town-wide exhibition of art in that in the presentation room next to the children's room. And, however they get their submissions, we may want to tap into that same source to figure out how they got all that stuff in there, because there's always something. So there's plenty of creative people in town.
Through the cultural council, they have contests through the cultural council. So yeah, that's definitely something we can do.
Yeah, there you go.
And they also
I think it's a good way
post things from the elementary schools. The teachers, the elementary schools will put artwork up in places like that too.
So that could already tie
and I
in the
think it's a
community.
good way to, yeah. And I think
Sheree?
it's a good way at Chelmsford Center for the Arts, you know how they used to have, you can post all the artwork, and I think it's a good way to engage the community in our committee. That's a good, that kind of double, it serves as dual purposes, because now we are inviting the community to an event. And I know this might be post-COVID, post-vaccine, but at least we're thinking ahead. So when that opportunity comes, that we can have all those entries, we can have them on a board like a gallery, and people, the community can decide, have them involved, which logo they like, and that's a way to get all of Chelmsford involved and excited as well.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, you have kids' artwork, and the people, you go to senior center, they can get involved. So now it kind of folds into what we're trying to do as a community as well, with being acknowledged as, the DREIC committee, or DRC, yeah, double.
And we would be the ones to make that decision, right? Our committee wouldn't determine, or who
I
would?
wouldn't do that,
the question.
I would not do
I'm
that.
just trying to get clarity. I'm not suggesting that we are. I'm trying to understand, if we open it up to the community, then I think we need to think about who makes the decision, or how is that decision made, and
we'd have to define that first, because if you
Right.
don't, it's going to get ugly. But
Exactly.
Jennifer has her hand up, and then Susan afterwards. But Jennifer's, oh, you're all set, Jennifer?
So it sounds like it's almost like we've created a new goal for ourselves, and we need a subcommittee just for this. And it might be one of the ones we put higher up on the list. So maybe we're not ready to make a decision about how to do it, because I think they're great ideas, but it's gotten bigger than my original idea. And I think it's gotten bigger in a better way. So it sounds like we're not ready to figure that part out yet either.
And the only reason why I say judging should be very specific how we're going to do it beforehand, because you don't want anybody questioning that process at all. Right. I liked the idea of having the public vote, but then we're stuck with whatever that is. So you just have to make sure that you have a very clearly defined.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I've got concerns about how we would effectively manage it. So that's, that still remains to be seen. I like the original one of going to the students in the schools and getting them involved, because I think that could be a quick win and a quick way for us to get our information out there. At the same time, I understand, the appeal for a different approach as well. So I think we just have to kind of figure out what we want to do. Lauren, you had your hand up?
Yes, I think we can combine these things. So if you put it out to the entire town, including the school system, we could choose the finalists, and then you can let the town vote on the finalists, and that way we have some control over what we want the logo to be. But at the same time, like Sherry said, having a display of all the entrants could be a wonderful thing in the future. So it's sort of layering this idea on each other. That's just my thought.
Seems reasonable. I don't know if Tricia, you have any thoughts as one who's been around sort of the longest around these things. Would that approach make sense, or does that
I
also
love
have
the idea of getting the community involved, and I love the idea of having all the submissions being displayed. I think that Sharice's point that that's going to get more people involved in who we are, what we're doing, what we're trying to do. I hope to identify with what we're trying to do. I think that's all wonderful ideas. But again, the judging part of it is really going to have to be well thought out. So I just want to make sure that the group kind of thinks about that a little bit more, about whether or not we're going to have a panel judge just within ourselves, or if we're going to let the community vote and or even like Lauren said, have final, like we get the last 5 and then have the community choose. That seems like it's got a little bit more control.
I think that's the best idea, because if we let the whole thing open up, we're going to be in a Bodie McBoatface situation.
Yeah. And I don't want an elected board to choose it for us. I think we should be choosing our logo somehow or another, whether we do it through letting the community do it as a whole, or we have our own. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we pick the 5 finalists, then we will not have the possibility of anything getting chosen that we wouldn't be happy with.
Exactly.
So that's where I'm agreeing with Lauren on that.
Yeah, I like that. And it gets the best of both worlds. You get the community aspect of it and a little bit more of the committee's, what we want to say, making sure that that logo fits with our mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
I have to leave early. I'm so sorry. I had posted it in some chat, but I don't think you saw it. So keep me abreast, okay, guys? And I'll see you. Are we meeting next week, Phil? I'm sorry to have to bug out early.
No, that's fine, because that was the next on the list. If we had other items, we do need to talk about our next meeting.
Oh,
so I would say that it's next. It would be next Tuesday, 7 to 8. And we should be all set. I see thumbs going up.
Yep.
Great. Okay, that seems to work. And I only had one quick unrelated question before I go. That Sharice, I know that you're from Ohio, and Joe, I also saw that you had an Ohio State sweatshirt on. And being a fellow Buckeye, I just wanted to make sure that you know that I acknowledge that was important. I'm Cincinnati born and bred, absolutely. And Ohio, as I always say, remember Ohio's round on the end and high in the middle. That's how you remember it. So there you go. And Joe, did you go to school at Ohio State, Joe? Or
no, my dad and all my uncles on that side are all alum.
Oh, okay. All right. So you made a mistake and went someplace else. That's okay. Oh, okay. No, that was just a quick. And Sharice, where did you say you were from in Ohio?
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, you got the wrong football team up there too, but that's okay. Okay. No, that's great. I always like to acknowledge a fellow Buckeyes where they are. So that's real important. Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, without any further ado, if there are no other issues, I would like to move that the November 10th meeting of the Diversity Committee be adjourned. Do I have a motion? Second.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a good one, folks.
Good night.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.